St. Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians in the 4th chapter, beginning at the 13th verse. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who have died, so that you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. Being asked not to grieve is a big ask and a tall order. Just as there is always someone who is coming to life, so there is always someone else who is going to death. Just as there is always someone who is telling a joke, so there is always someone else who is shedding a tear. So then, is this description of life just an unending cycle where every event and every emotion cancel out the other? Is there any sense of direction in it? Is there any energy in it? Is there any purpose to it? Of course there is. Life as we know it and live it inevitably contains both sorrow and joy. Our personal contribution to life is in large part framed by our reaction and our response to both sorrow and joy as presenting emotions. If we consider the particular events in world history that gather us together this morning in real time and by virtual communication, the remembrancing of 2 world wars, we get some sense of such a combination of darkness and light and their essential interplay. The horrors and the relentlessnesses and the devastations of 2 world wars have played sustained havoc with individuals and civilizations, distorting and disfiguring them and caricaturing them in a downward and a negative direction. They have also threatened peace and stability. Inevitably, they create a worked example of grotesque diminishment of the other. And the other is essential to our understanding and embracing of our own identity. At the same time, there rose from the gnarled barbed wire and the black curling smoke and the annihilation of trust, the whole concept of human rights and the European Union as we now have it. We should, of course, have hoped to have these by different and ironic means, but that was not going to happen. And the important thing for us today is that we do have them at all. And like everything else that we have, they are as good as we make them to be. They cannot do what we do not do. They cannot be what we do not become as we respond to or reject the opportunities they offer. Both individuals and nations are bound up in wars. Wars spill in both of these directions. When Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, he was asking them to make up their minds and to follow through on the consequences of decision. He had an uphill task, it seems. In the middle of our first reading, this is expressed starkly. Then Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him." And they said, "We are witnesses." Joshua decided that he needed to resolve the issue there and then, on that very day, by making a covenant with the people and by making statutes and ordinances for them there and there at Shechem. These people, after all, were on the move to what would become their land. They needed to be held to account. They needed to discern, to clarify, to codify, and to develop their memory of themselves with precision, with accuracy, and with creativity. They are about to establish a settled nation. They really need to do well. There is, to my mind, a number of things we can take to heart on Remembrance Sunday from the readings for today. We are invited through the first letter to the Thessalonians to honour and to give due place to those who have died while we live. This is needed in St. Paul's letter precisely because there was an acute expectation that the Lord would return during the lifetime of the first Christians. But then they had to work out a way to cope with the lengthening of memory because of the continuing delay in this return happening. And so the Christians in Thessalonica had to come to some understanding of both themselves and of those who had died within this framework. Any and every post-war generation has to work this out, not least because the manner of war death and continuing war injury is so brutal and so non-negotiable. In such a way as this, we are given an important insight into the creation of identity in the book of Joshua. We meet Joshua, of course, in his last throw of the dice before he dies. He explains to the Israelites their responsibilities before he delves into their opportunities. Today we want and we go for opportunities first, and often responsibilities come in a very poor second. But this is the rhetoric of consumerism, rather than the rhetoric of the common good. It is, as I say, Joshua's last throw of the dice. Verse 29 states this very factually. After these events, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. Our first lesson then makes it abundantly clear that Joshua wants the people to know that remembrance and remembering of who they are, and just as important who they are not, is vitally important. The power of memory as identity, as community, as belonging, as nurture, and as connection to God, all come through forcefully in the rhetoric and the content of this dying old man. The Jewish people, in their religious self-understanding and in their religious expression throughout history, have continued to put significant energy into memory and remembrance through repetition, through interpretation, through ritual, through prayer and through rejoicing, and through the conviction that they have a divinely given entitlement and need to wrestle with God, as their ancestor Jacob wrestled with the angel. It's wrestling that gives them a place at the table, and it's wrestling that gives them identity with God. On this solemn day of remembrance, we need to wrestle and to treasure memory, not as something relating solely to the past, but as something relating to the future. The anxiety of the Christians of Thessalonica has not gone away on Remembrance Sunday 2020. We are still caught in the storm of an argument about where we who live stand in relation to those who have died. This question is particularly poignant and particularly forceful in relation to those who have died in 2 world wars. We remember locally today in particular those who as members of this university served and lived and served and died in both world wars. We are committed to peace and we are committed to justice. Others have been thus committed before. We are committed to diversity and to inclusion. Others have been thus committed before. We are committed to freedom and opportunity for all. Others have been thus committed before. As we stand in silent remembrance with millions of people round the rotating globe, and as we remember in that silence those we have never seen or known, nor could we have done so, let us remember to remember the words to Joshua and the words of Joshua in his dying moments. Let us take them today with us out into a life of dynamic remembering. And the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Then Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him." And so let us be extra careful that our idealism matches our actions. Let us be careful too that our promises match our consistency. Let us be careful once again that our interest in ourselves does not absorb our responsibility for others. Let us be careful that our remembering does not fade. It was, after all, Adolf Hitler who said, "But who remembers the Armenians?" The Armenian genocide of 1915 resulted in the death of at least 1.5 million Armenians at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. The Holocaust of World War II resulted in the death of 5 million Jews and other people of otherness at the hands of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Clearly, Adolf Hitler made the calculation that nobody would remember. Mercifully, he was wrong, entirely wrong. It is important not to forget, because let us be sure and let us be clear. Those who calculate and premeditate to do evil do not forget. Genocide in every century is always a possible outcome of war. Holding memories, remembering genocide and wrongdoing, it is essential that good people do this. We always need to learn from this and to guard against it. Today the question still is very live in our time. Who is remembering the Armenians and all the others whom we have forgotten?